Everyone, I'm Mark DeGrasse, and you're listening to Podcast Mark, where I have my friends, colleagues, and other business professionals on to talk about personal development, professional development, and business development in that order, where we find the intersection, and usually it ends up with self-development and philosophy, just because I like that stuff. Today I have Toby Brooks. I've actually worked with him several times. He is a professor at
Texas Tech.
Texas Tech. That was it. I almost said UT. I'm like, oh my God, I can't get this wrong.
All good.
Welcome to the show, Toby. Appreciate you being here.
Thankful for the opportunity, Mark. It's always great to connect.
Well, I love talking to people in upper education because, I think times are shifting for literally everything that we do on a daily basis, but specifically with higher education, where people's perception is starting to be changed, where it's not like everybody, well, a lot of people are just saying like, I don't need higher education. That's just not something that's going to contribute to me. There's too much debt involved. It takes too long. All these different things. And I'd love to hear your perspective, especially since you're into AI. You're the most into AI educator that I think I've talked to, other than Steve Rossman. Steve Rossman, he does a lot of stuff too. But I'd love to hear kind of where you see things going and how people could be prepared for the future.
Yeah, that's a great question. And honestly, I've got a real complicated relationship with it because it's real easy to be a really critical consumer of education. We were talking beforehand about a course I'm taking right now that is not the best learning experience. It's antiquated, it's dated, it moves at the pace of higher education, which is monolithically slow. And as an aspiring entrepreneur, I find that it's this growing source of frustration because you see how quick and agile business can be, and you see how slow and painful and just mired a lot of state or higher ed associated things can be. And so when I say it's complicated, I'm in it. I'm a tenured professor. My daughter's a junior in college. My son he's a senior in high school looking to go to college. And so I can poke holes in the establishment of higher ed, but that's kind of me. Like I'm a consumer of it as a student. My kids are consumers of it, and I'm iterating it. I'm building it. So for me personally, it's really been a season of kind of a tough, hard look inside to see, okay, what's the purpose of a college degree in 2024? And I think it's different than it was when we were coming up. And you'd mentioned beforehand that, and we see this in a lot of uh, the programs that are built around kind of life skills and the idea of a well-rounded education. And people are like, well, why do I need to take a history course, or why do I need a class in whatever? I mean, music appreciation. And the genesis of that was scholars were supposed to be well-rounded, informed citizens, and those would be the leaders of our societies and such. And in this day and age, my son, like I can remember when he was 9 or 10 years old, and he would come in and just cook something, and I'd be like, "Where did you learn to do that?" Well, I watched a YouTube video on it. I mean, so we have this consumer-oriented generation that is used to consuming education in small chunks, and short form video that we've talked about is second nature to them. And at the same time, we've also got a system that is, like I said, notoriously slow. So I'll give you an example. I was looking at a graduate certificate program, and I found one that looked interesting. It was 15 credit hours, and I checked on it, and it was like $30,000 through this university. And I found a comparable program on Coursera for $200, a massive online course. And you get a certificate at the end and maybe a digital badge or something, but $30K versus $200. And, at that point, it's like, well, as long as I take away something, it was money well spent. It was time well invested. And so the opportunities for learning have never been better. And with that comes competition. And we've seen universities that have fallen by the wayside. These small private liberal arts schools just cannot compete. And that's what competition does. Is it tends to winnow out the weaker amongst us, and at the same time, hopefully it helps the strongest get stronger. They're building, they're iterating, they're pivoting toward what works. So for me personally, I would say in this day and age, um, that college degree, it's a different thing than it used to be. My son even mentioned this. He's like, I'm going to major in math, but I'm going to take a Python course. I'm going to take, I'll go to Coursera and pay $15 to learn how to use R or some other
Mm.
software program instead of, uh, multiple semesters or years of study and thousands of dollars and incurring debt. You can learn those skills oftentimes free or for really cheap. And that's an exciting thing.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, that's a very, modern view of the situation, because I think the normal educator, just say your long established, professor who's teaching stuff that's way too old to be useful today, doesn't see that. They just see like, well, this is how you do education and this is it and blah, blah, blah. And it sounds like you're really taking a perspective of like, no, we have these awesome new technologies. We have these awesome new abilities to find information that would have cost tens of thousands of dollars before, and now you have it. With that said, though, I think there is, something needed in the big degree, and it's the understanding that you have of why these things are done this way. And it's not just a step-by-step solution, which is useful if you want to get like a specific task done, but can you
Mhm.
really innovate when it
Yeah.
comes to actually solving a problem that's similar but not the same? Or since you don't have a step-by-step approach that's just been spoon-fed to you, are you going to be able to make that leap of understanding, which you never really established because you didn't take the time to learn the stuff that needed to be known? And so,
Right.
but a lot of people in college, I say that because when I went to college, my goal was always like, okay, I'm going to use this class. Or, I was doing real estate and I had a scooter shop in Fullerton, California when I was going through college. And so I was like, oh man, okay, I could use this operational management course to do this. And now it's useful. And so I was always trying to apply and learn. But most people are just there for the grade or there for the
Mhm.
degree, and they don't care about the lesson. And they say things like, what does history matter? And I'm like, I mean, now, since I'm older and more mature, I'm like, oh my gosh, that's the stuff that totally matters. Like you have to have this understanding. And you might not know how to apply it until you actually get out there and learn, like, man. Well, it's funny because I always reference like this course I took in South Pacific culture. And it was about how, the Polynesian culture was actually developed by when they had these giant canoes and they would go to these islands and they'd have to soar out into nothingness to find, new land. And I was like, man, that's kind of like, how businesses and industries are developed. And there's lessons all over the place, but until you, are mature enough to understand where they apply, you can't really appreciate them. And so you think like, why do I have to take this course? This is a waste
Right.
of my time. But how do you convince somebody of that? Because I'm sure as an educator, you totally
Yeah.
get what I'm
Well,
saying, but most kids don't.
yeah, I love what you said that there's lessons everywhere. And I'll give you an example. My daughter did a study abroad. She's a vocal performance major and she went to Italy last summer. And, naysayers would be like, okay, so you blew 6 grand to go to Italy for a month and sing. And I was talking to a business owner who said he preferentially looks for students that have done study abroad. And I'm like, well, tell me more. Why? And he said, if a student's done study abroad, especially a Gen Z student, they've
Mm,
had to navigate the airport. They've had to figure out, flight changes or my luggage got lost or where do I go to exchange my currency? Like those are life skills that they're probably not going to get anywhere else. And so if they've been able to navigate that and get home safely in one piece, then they have a skill set that the vast majority of students or professionals their age probably don't have. And you're not going to
mm,
learn that in a classroom. And so there are a lot of those types of lessons tucked away in a college education. Whether it's where you go to do your laundry or where do you go online to pay for your parking pass, all those types of things demonstrate skills that are beneficial and leverageable, whether you're as an entrepreneur or whether you're as someone's employee. When it comes down to highly technical stuff, I almost feel like the YouTube, the Udemy, the Coursera's, that's the cheaper way to get that done.
yep.
And in many ways it's more contemporary. Like I was mentioning to you, this entrepreneurship class is based on a book that was published in 2011. I guarantee you I can go to Coursera and find a more current entrepreneurship course that would cost me a fraction of what I'm paying for this 3 credit hour grad class that I'm in right now. So I think you really have to be a good consumer of knowledge and your education and understand that that college degree probably doesn't mean what it used to, but there's still value in it. And there's
Mm,
still plenty of life skills to be garnered from putting yourself in that situation. And I really think there's no replacement for that. And that's why I say I may have some skeptical viewpoints, but I'm helping put my daughters through school, and my son's going to go soon. Like I haven't steered them away from the enterprise,
Mm,
and I really believe that they will emerge as stronger human beings on the backside. Now, that doesn't mean everybody has to do it. There's also a place
mm,
for technical school education, and you think about how many thousands of dollars a young student who maybe doesn't know what they want to do is incurring in debt when they could very easily, if they've got an idea and can go online and learn about lean startup or business model canvas, and they can build that scooter shop that you
mm.
had and parlay that and transfer that over into entrepreneurial success. College is not the universal prescription for all that ails us, but for the right kid, I feel like it can be a great learning opportunity.
I love that perspective. Oh, and I love that you sent your daughter overseas because, for me personally, like I did a trip to Vietnam, and it was basically with my business professor, and we toured all the factories and the manufacturing plants and all that kind of stuff over there. And I reference that constantly. I'm like, man, I had a lot of classes in college, but like that trip, like I learned more about myself. I learned more about the world in general. And then it's something that shows other people like, oh wow, you actually took the initiative to go travel there to a place you've never been. And honestly, I saw it on a flyer on the professor's like bulletin board, and I was like, oh, Vietnam, I've never even thought about going there. And but the other factor is that, but students have such an opportunity to do all of these things, and they'll be encouraged to do all these things while
Mhm.
they're in school because they're pursuing knowledge. And so we all want to support that. And just a lot of them just don't take advantage. They just are
Right.
like, this is costing me money, and I should be doing something better. And what I think you need is really humility to understand that you don't really understand anything. And even if
Right.
you watched a ton of TikTok, and even if you have a ton of friends and stuff, it just doesn't matter because you have no idea. You have no understanding just how little you know. And now at
Yeah.
age 40, I'm realizing that, or I have been for the last year or two. And I'm like, man, I thought I knew stuff. And then the more you actually know, the more you realize like, ah, no, you don't actually know
Yeah.
anything. And so
Well, I'll
it's
also backpedal a little. To her credit. I didn't send her. She sought it out. She
ah,
fundraised to do it, and
wow,
she made it
even better.
happen. And so that was a tremendous learning experience. I think she'd tell you that it was the singing was kind of the gravy. That was the fun part. She learned
Mm,
some skills. She learned some Italian diction. There were some tangible checkbox things that she learned, but just the resourcefulness. She organized and held a fundraiser concert at our church that was the story of her life. And she put this whole thing together. She found tech crew
ah,
that would volunteer to run the soundboard. We recorded it and live streamed it. I mean, she really took ownership in it. And those are skills that will translate far beyond just what she learned as a vocalist, even though that was cool too.
man, that's huge too. There's just so many lessons there that yeah, you can't teach in a classroom, of course, but also it just show, what some initiative and some good parenting where it's like, hey, you want to do this, then figure it out, and then they
Right.
do it, and they're like, man,
Yeah.
that's a usually, I hate to say it, but a lot of people don't have case studies and like that, and they've been working for 10, 15, 20 years, and they've just never had the opportunity to do that kind of stuff. So I think,
Yep.
while education has definitely changed, I do think there's a ton of value in going through that process and completing the giant 4-year task that you're on. But I also like how you said it's not for everybody.
Mhm.
And
But
honestly, there's nothing wrong with that.
yeah.
But in that perspective, like that is going completely against the grain of what we've all been told for 15, 20 years about everybody should have a degree and this is what
Yeah.
you do, which now just sounds like marketing propaganda to me.
It kind of feels like a pyramid scheme because
It does.
as an educator, I've got to get new students in all the time. So there's a scene in the it's a Taylor Sheridan show, Tulsa King, where Sylvester Stallone is talking to a guy he's hired as his driver, and he's talking about the value of a college education, and it's fiction, but I think there's value in it. He says, if you can graduate from a college in 4 or 5 years, that tells me as a potential employer that you can pretty much show up on time most of the time. You can commit to a long-term goal and chip away at it. I mean, there are values instilled and kind of baked
Mm,
right into that degree, whether it's a an associate's all the way to a doctorate, whatever. But it demonstrates that you've got skills in addition to knowledge,
mm,
and I feel like that's maybe what's missing in we've got more access to knowledge than we've ever had, but I
mm.
feel like not every program is great at building in those value added lessons, and that's where hopefully a good program can serve a student well.
Now, what do you say to the kids who, because I think a lot of the miss is that you see these, I've known some people who switched majors like 6 times, and you're just like, what the hell are you doing? At this point, like, just get something. But it's that whole question of like, well, it's not my passion, or well, I just don't like it. Do you have advice for students where it's like, hey, here's how to get some direction?
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of times that's just the only thing missing.
Honestly, I kind of miss being at the undergrad level because I don't have as many of those conversations. I'm at the Health Sciences Center, and it's a professional school.
Oh,
So
okay.
most of our students have their bachelor's degrees already. They kind of know what they want to be when they grow up by the time they show up on our doorstep. But I do adjunct for Texas Tech main campus, and I work with freshmen and sophomores, and they don't have it figured out. And frankly, that's an exciting thing for me as a
Mm,
mentor and as an educator to help them kind of sort through. I tend to be in kinesiology, so they're considering careers as physical therapists or occupational therapists, athletic trainers, strength coaches, and even though the foundational knowledge is common between many of those professions, whichever direction you head off in takes your life in a whole different way. And
mhm,
so if you are 4 or 5, 10 years down the road and you realize like this was this was not the move, I made a
yeah.
mistake.
Screwed up.
Um, yeah, so those are great conversations to have, and not that I'm going to give them the answers, but I want them to consider the questions and
Mm,
really sort through and be purposeful about why do you love this? Are you just chasing a paycheck, or is this going to provide you with the kind of lifestyle that you want? Or what about your work-life balance? Many of the careers that my students are in, they're intense. They're 70, 80 hours a week, 7 days a week. And is that sustainable for you? Are you excited by the prospect of being on the road and traveling? For a lot
mm.
of young students, they're excited to be, on a chartered jet going to a football game. But as you get a little bit older and you've got kids at home and family responsibilities, that's a little less enticing than it used to be. So I think it's a critical thing for students to make informed decisions and understand that questioning what you want to be when you grow up is human nature. Like none
Mm.
of us ever, I don't feel like any of us really
I still don't
fully
know.
figure that out. I mean, you're in the midst of a career pivot right now, and that's part of what it means to seek out your purpose. And
Mm,
sometimes you understand that this season was great, but I've got this void, this need to do something new.
mm.
And why would we expect an 18 to 22-year-old with a semi-formed prefrontal cortex? Their cognition and their rational skills and decision making aren't fully formed yet. Like that's neurology. So I tend to be pretty, I give grace in those
Mm.
instances because the best way for you to make the best decision is to really weigh the options and talk through why you want to do what you want to do.
Imagine a world where your brand transcends visibility, embedding itself into the consciousness of your customers. Welcome to the AI Branding Bootcamp, where this vision becomes reality. Dive into AI-powered research, strategy, and execution to create a brand that's not just recognized, but felt. From crafting your brand's avatar to mastering AI-generated content, emerge with a brand that resonates deeply. Ready to transform your brand into an unforgettable experience? Join us at the AI Branding Bootcamp. The future of branding begins now.
Oh, that's a great way to look at it. Because I mean, you're right. I thought I knew what I wanted in my early 20s, and then it turns out that I was completely wrong, which you often find out about your 20s. But you still need that base understanding, and that's why I think the higher education is actually should be teaching you how to think about things, not necessarily how to do the things. Because honestly, I don't even know what AI looks like in a year. Like, and I teach people how to use AI, and I preface it with that. I say like, hey, yeah, prompting is hot right now, but there's a good chance that it's going to be completely unnecessary pretty soon, maybe. And so, but it'll give you a base understanding of how AI works. And so it's still useful to learn that thing now.
Yeah.
How do you kind of approach that? Because I know, a lot of people look at college as job training, and that's just not what it is. The
Yeah.
professional side, yeah, it can be, but it's once you get hired, you're going to have to learn a whole nother bunch of systems, and the base
Right.
knowledge is really all you end up with.
Yeah, and I think in a lot of ways, our system is so lagging behind because most of my students, they'll have this massive test and it's memory recall, and they're like, well, why do I need to memorize this when I've literally got, the world in my pocket and I can Google it if I don't know it. And that's true. I mean, you do need some foundational knowledge. If I go to the doctor and my physician pulls out their phone to Google everything, then I'm not real confident in their skill set. But that said, uh, how can I help them sort through the things they can't Google? Good
Mm,
patient interactions are not Googleable. Uh, Emotional intelligence is an acquired skill, and being able to resolve conflict and communicate clearly, those are things that I think are more important to teach today than they've ever been, because the content knowledge is at their fingertips in a way that it's never been before. When I was an undergrad, if I needed to find information, I had to physically go to the library and search it up in a in a physical copy of a journal, and that's not the world we live in. And so you can either cry about how things have changed, or you can try to iterate and build toward them and leverage those tools. We've had this conversation before. AI is not the evil that it's made out to be. I'm not going to resort to having my students handwrite their things so that I can make sure they didn't use Chat GPT. My son came home yesterday and he said, our teacher is having us turn in our Chat GPT prompts as the first stage in a research paper assignment. I'm like, that's genius. Like, let's use this tool for good instead of automatically painting it as students are lazy. They're just doing this so that they don't have to work. No, like,
mm,
I'm not lazy because I hop in my car and drive to the office. I'm using a tool, and I would be foolish to waste the time it would take to make it 10 miles to work that I need to do. Tools are not inherently good or bad. They're non-directional. And
mm.
so I think a good educator would look for ways to leverage those tools. I mean, we'll use things like polling apps in class. So we have like a quiz show. Back in the day, we had like these response clicker buzzers, and these systems were like expensive, and you had to carry them around. Well, we don't need that anymore. Everybody's got a cell phone, and we can set up a quiz app ahead of time. And instead of crying about how, oh, they're always on their phone or have to put their phones away, like, instead, let's put them to work so that they can't use
Mm.
them. It's like Star Wars. Like, there's a dark side and a light side, and I want to use it for good. I don't want it to be used for evil. You're not searching for a new pair of shoes to buy while you're in my class because your phone is busy answering questions.
Ah, I love that. Well, and actually, I said that last night. I was at dinner with a bunch of CMOs from like a bunch of big companies. It's like a monthly meeting thing. And I was like, the AI is actually just taking away work that robots should do and humans shouldn't. Where it's like, yes, I could process all this data and I could do all this research manually. Like, because even when I was in college, I did go to the library, to find stuff and then take a nap. But the fact of the matter is that you're right. I mean, AI is just like CAD, software for engineers, where it's like, yeah,
Mhm.
they could have sat at a desk and got a piece of paper and a compass and all this stuff and draw something that's amazing in 40 hours, or go to the program and get the whole thing done way faster, and you're more productive, and you're not wasting your time on stuff that a machine could do and should do. And now you could do the real side, which is for me, I always talk about creativity and innovation, and using the chaotic nature of our minds for good, to find different ways of doing a million different things. But I'm guessing are you alone in that, or is there like a growing base of educators that are starting to realize it?
I think particularly those that are younger, my
Mm,
millennial colleagues who are, they're wrapping up their doctoral work and they're making the transition over into the college classroom. They recognize that there are a lot of tools available while they were students that older colleagues, myself included, and older might not have had. And so I think there's an awareness with that. I also think that it's the duty of a senior faculty member. I serve as an assistant dean of faculty success. So we do workshops and training for our faculty. Many times they're healthcare providers that have never
mm,
been trained how to teach. And so they don't know how to write a good test question, or a syllabus is not something that you just innately know how to write. And so we work to try to train them. And we've done a fair amount of work on AI and machine learning and just big data. We've incorporated some of those tools to help streamline using dashboards and creating, like Power BI, so that we can track some of these things.
mm.
And so as the familiarity gets better and better, and as just the culture, as we're bringing new energy and people that have had more experience with this, then naturally kind of the knowledge level of your team continues to improve. And so I think it is a slow process, but I think we're trending in the right direction, not at the speed of business. And I said it at the start, higher ed and a lot of your government agencies, they're just so painfully slow, and there's so much bureaucracy. And that's what I love about entrepreneurship is you gather the data, you make a data-driven decision, and you run as fast as you can into the next mistake. And and that's not how uh,
Well,
institutions of higher learning tend to operate. It's like death by committee.
oh yeah. Well, the thing is, and it's you could go into all these different like reasons why it's like that. Like, oh well, it's established protocols, and you have to do a book that's vetted by so many people, and there's a procedure to it. But at the end of the day, the entrepreneur is starving, and the bureaucracy isn't, and they
Yeah.
have so much money now that they could literally just hang out, and it's not going to make a personal difference to any of them in terms of their income and their lifestyle and all these different things. And so it's almost like the hunger that entrepreneurs have, because you have to, otherwise you're not gonna, your business might not exist in a week if you aren't like that. Leads to the need for innovation right now.
Yeah.
And now tech is just even faster, so it's able to keep up with that demand and feed it and make it even faster. And so I mean, it's kind of hard not to see the divide between, kind of institutional education and just the street smarts that you get using ChatGPT and stuff. But I do think there is a middle ground that where both are super useful. But I try to picture the transition, because not to say 10 years are good or bad, but some people end up resting on their laurels and are just like, well, I'm doing good, you know. It's
Yeah.
so maybe it's just a different vetting process, or a
Yeah.
different,
Well,
you
for
know.
an entrepreneur, the notion that if a man won't hunt, he won't eat, that's completely foreign in a lot of workplaces I've been in, where I've literally heard people say, "Well, just 10 more years and I can retire." What are you going to do between now and then? As little as possible. And for an entrepreneur to have that mindset, you're literally going to
You're
starve
done.
to death. It's outcomes based, and it's a competition, and you've got to win more than you lose, or you're going to be working for somebody.
Yep.
And so it's easy for me to say that. And I often say this, like I've got kind of a timid heart of an entrepreneur, but I've never had the courage to go all in. I've got the day job and the steady paycheck, but the entrepreneurship stuff really lights the fires for me, and it's exciting. When I first crossed your path, I was looking at the company you were working for, and in one of their job descriptions, it was like this this entire list of, if you're not excited by the opportunity to be involved in commerce and understanding, the nature of a capitalistic society, like business isn't inherently evil. And I think in a lot of spaces, it's kind of been painted that way, but business is designed to bring value. And if my business doesn't bring value, it fails. And that could be said for an institution of higher learning. And we've seen universities that didn't bring value fail. And so if I'm losing more than I'm winning, it's not long before eventually I don't play anymore. So for an entrepreneur, that timeline is compressed, and the ability to weather failure is much more limited than it would be for a massive multi-site state institution. But the same holds true. And I feel like if you can take some of that mentality of entrepreneurship, the speed, the agility, the need for results, and plant that into some of these institutions, you immediately stand out compared to the rest of the noise in the marketplace.
I love that perspective. And, honestly, I think it's, using education as a tool, just like we're talking about using AI as a tool, like you could get the most out of it as you want, or you could get absolutely nothing. You could use the information for good or bad. And it's really up to you to make that decision. And, I think it's just a correction, because even when I went to school, it's like, oh, going to college, it wasn't that bad. I think I paid like $12,000 for all 4 years. And so I'm like, am I just biased because it was like essentially free? And then I got scholarships, so it was like free. And so I'm like, what is everybody stressing out about? But I think that with the added cost, I think there's an added expectation that if I spend 100, 200, 300,000 on a degree, I better be able to recoup that within, how many years? Like how many years could you tolerate that kind of debt without it paying off at all? In the business world, you're done. It didn't pay off immediately. And so now you're done. So it should be interesting to see how things flesh out or flesh out, however you want to look at it. And I think you're doing a fantastic job, by the way. Like, you're embracing the technology, you're kind of integrating, the old style approach with the new style approach. My favorite tip of yours was the short form videos that you make to teach the important lessons that are just bite-sized consumable chunks, just like everybody likes to consume online. And so I think you're already doing it. I think you're part of the big transition of education. And, I hope you keep it up, because you're doing awesome.
I appreciate that. Thanks, man.
Well, thanks a lot for coming on the show. I always enjoy talking to you. I think your perspective on education is very refreshing, because I think, when I think of some of my professors, I'm like, oh, there's no way he's happy about this. But you're like, no, I'm going to just take it on. And you're having your students do it. It sounds like you have your kids do it. And that's really admirable. So where can people learn more about you? Maybe take one of your courses.
Yeah, I appreciate that. So my podcast is Becoming Undone, undonepodcast.com. It's on all the major podcasting platforms. I talk a lot about some of the things we discuss, big pivots, and how setbacks can prepare us for success. As far as the university goes, I'm at the Texas Tech University Health Sciences Center. I teach within the PhD, SCD, and the Masters of Athletic Training programs, and also teach from time to time over at Texas Tech in the Department of Kinesiology. So you can find me there or at tobyjbrooks.com.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Toby. Really admire what you're doing over there. And I hope it succeeds. And I hope more educators kind of jump on board and realize that, none of this is inherently evil. And if it's a useful tool, you're being silly not to use it just because it's not like it used to be. And
absolutely.
And that rate of change isn't going to slow down anytime soon. So, get on board before the train is gone.
Well, thanks for the opportunity. It's always a pleasure, Mark.
Thank you very much. And thank you so much for listening. This has been Podcast Mark, where I have people come on to talk about business, and we end up talking about life and a bunch of other stuff. So if you like that, keep on tuning in.